There is a quiet, heavy exhaustion that sits just beneath your skin. You feel it when you stare out at the world, a strange, undeniable sensation that you are looking at a painted curtain, waiting for it to be pulled back. You have been taught your entire life that seeing is believing. You were told to trust what is right in front of you, to rely on the solid shapes and sharp edges that make up your days. But what if the very act of looking is exactly what keeps you blind? Your spirit aches for something more, doesn't it? You have a profound, silent craving to witness the true vastness of the universe, to finally experience the boundless nature of who you really are. You feel this immense presence inside you, a limitless energy that hums softly in your quietest moments. Yet every single time you open your eyes, you are instantly forced back into a small, rigid box of physical forms. You try to grasp the infinite, but you are constantly pulled back down by the heavy, suffocating anchor of what you can merely see. This is the great paradox of your existence. The absolute faith you have placed in the visible world is not a tool for understanding. It is a blindfold tightly wrapped around your soul. The materialist promise that the physical world is all there is the most convincing illusion ever designed. You are desperately trying to witness the unseen majesty of your own spiritual nature, while demanding that it present itself as a solid object. It is a heartbreaking struggle, a silent war between the infinite truth of your spirit and the stubborn demand of a world that forces you to measure reality only by what casts a shadow. You feel trapped because you are trying to use the heavy tools of the material world to unlock the divine, and as long as you believe that your physical sight is the ultimate judge of truth, you will remain captive to an elaborate, beautiful farce. But to understand just how deep this deception goes, we have to step away from the abstract and look closely at the very instruments you trust so deeply. Take a moment to simply feel the weight of your own eyes. At the end of a long day, you can actually sense the physical strain behind them, a dull, quiet ache pulling at the delicate nerves. You have lived your entire life believing that these two fragile, watery orbs are your absolute windows to the universe. You trust them implicitly. When they report that a room is empty, you believe you are alone. When they show you a solid wall, you believe in boundaries. But to understand why your soul feels so restless, we must strip away the romantic poetry of human sight and look at the cold, raw biology of what is actually happening. You are not witnessing the universe. You are experiencing a severe, almost tragic biological censorship. Consider the infinite, staggering majesty of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is a roaring, endless ocean of vibrating energy. It contains colossal radio waves surging through the cosmos, infrared frequencies, ultraviolet radiation, X-rays and gamma rays that pierce through the very fabric of galaxies. This dynamic, swirling ocean is the actual texture of existence. This is the fabric of reality moving all around you, at every single moment, passing right through your physical body as you sit there. And yet, out of this terrifyingly beautiful vastness, what is your physical equipment actually capable of registering? Your biological eyes are tuned only to what we call visible light. That phrase sounds significant, perhaps even comforting, until you realize the brutal mathematical truth. Visible light makes up less than 1/1000th of 1% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Let that undeniable scientific fact sink deep into your bones. For every 100,000 waves of truth crashing into your living room right now, your organic machinery is only capable of registering a single, isolated drop. It is a pathetic, microscopic sliver of existence. You are quite literally navigating through a roaring, multidimensional ocean of energy, completely blind to 99.9% of it, simply because your fleshy hardware was never built to capture the infinite. When you look around the space you are in right now, you feel a stubborn confidence that you are seeing what is truly there. But your eyes are not showing you the real world. They are merely catching a ridiculously narrow, impoverished band of bouncing photons and mechanically converting them into crude, restricted electrical pulses. That is all physical vision is. It is a biological translation, and a tremendously poor one at that. Every physical form you cling to, every sharp edge that makes you feel separated from the universe, is nothing but a highly compressed, severely filtered data stream. There is a deep unspoken grief in this realization. You, a boundless consciousness, capable of expanding across dimensions, are temporarily shackled to a sensory organ that leaves you profoundly blind. You have spent decades making monumental life decisions, judging what is true, and limiting your own spiritual power based entirely on the feedback of an instrument that fails to see almost everything. This is the invisible, catastrophic error you make every single morning when you pry your eyelids open. You mistakenly believe that the world has fully loaded in front of you. You surrender your immense spiritual authority to a biological defect, accepting this starved fraction of light as the totality of what exists. This unquestioning trust is exactly what keeps your frequency anchored to the dense, heavy struggles of the material plane. But if the eyes themselves are capturing almost nothing, what exactly happens to those faint, restricted electrical signals once they leave the optic nerve? The destination of those pulses is where the true nature of your isolation begins. Close your eyes for just a fleeting second and bring your full, undivided attention to the space resting directly behind your forehead. Feel the heavy, solid enclosure of your skull. We rarely pause to acknowledge this deeply unsettling anatomical truth. The consciousness you identify as you is currently residing in a pitch-black, silent and sealed vault of bone. Your brain, the delicate organ supposedly processing your entire existence, has never actually seen a single ray of sunlight. It has never once touched the wind or felt the warmth of a fire. It sits entirely alone in the absolute dark, floating in absolute silence. Everything you believe you are seeing right now is not a direct, open experience of the universe. It is a localized projection happening strictly within the suffocating, pitch-black room of your own head. When you open your eyes, you feel a comforting sense of expansion, as though you are looking outward into a vast, open space. But the physical truth is far more claustrophobic. Your eyeballs are not crystal-clear windows to the world. They are highly defective, fluid-filled organic lenses pushing fragmented, distorted data into that dark cranial room. And these lenses are fundamentally flawed by their very design. Right now, as you look straight ahead, there is a literal gaping hole in your field of vision. It is the physiological blind spot. Because the thick optic nerve must violently plunge through the back of your retina to carry signals to your brain, there is an exact space where absolutely no light receptors exist. You are entirely, irreparably blind in a distinct portion of your gaze every single second of your waking life. But you do not see a terrifying black void floating in the middle of your room, do you? You do not see the empty, jagged hole tearing through your field of vision. Why? Because you are not looking at reality. The isolated consciousness, locked inside the dark room of your skull, simply guesses what should be there. Your brain acts like a frantic, desperate artist trapped in a cellar, furiously painting over the gaping holes in your visual feed. It cuts, pastes, and invents textures, colors, and patterns, seamlessly stitching together a continuous, unbroken image, so you do not realize how broken the lens truly is. You are, quite literally, hallucinating a significant portion of the room you are sitting in right now. Allow that creeping, heavy sense of isolation to wash over you for a moment. The solid walls around you, the floor beneath your feet, the very hands resting in your lap. How much of what you are currently experiencing is actually out there, and how much is just a desperate neural invention? You are entirely dependent on a patchwork of fabrications, a tapestry stitched together by an organ that lives in eternal darkness and simply guesses at the shapes of the outside world. This is the profound, aching loneliness of the human physical condition. You feel so separated from the universe because you are anatomically walled off from it, forced to watch an edited, delayed, and heavily altered movie playing endlessly on the inner walls of your cranium. You are wandering through a waking dream, completely anchored to a physical illusion built by defective lenses and an isolated mind. But this creeping isolation begs an immediate, highly uncomfortable question. If your mind is permanently locked in the dark, forced to constantly hallucinate the missing pieces of your visual world just to keep the image intact, what invisible force is deciding exactly which heavy, solid shapes to project into your awareness? If the picture of the world is being heavily edited before you even perceive it, what unseen mechanism is holding the scissors? Feel the rhythm of your own breathing right now, the rise and fall of your chest. Notice how deeply anchored you are to the physical sensations of your body. We wander through our days, carrying a quiet, desperate arrogance, believing that we are the conscious authors of our own perception. You walk into a room and you think to yourself that you are choosing to look at a chair or choosing to stare out a window. But this sense of visual free will is a complete and utter fabrication. You are not choosing what you see. You are being commanded. You are living under a ruthless, invisible dictatorship, and the tyrant is your own survival instinct. The mechanism that filters your world does not care about your spiritual awakening. It has absolute contempt for your desire to merge with the infinite. It cares about one cold, primitive directive: keeping a fragile, fleshy organism breathing for one more day. Your brain acts as a heavily armed warden, and the dense, solid world of 3 dimensions is its maximum security prison. Consider what your visual cortex is actually obsessing over every waking second. It is compulsively wired to detect stark contrast, hard boundaries, and sudden movement. It is perpetually hunting for edges you might fall over, heavy objects that might crush you, and the subtle, threatening shifts in your environment. This ancient animalistic vigilance acts as a relentless, suffocating censor. It actively, aggressively oppresses your soul's natural ability to perceive that which has no shape. It stands guard at the gates of your mind, violently rejecting the subtle, fluid, and majestic energies of the spiritual realm. Why? Because in the brutal, binary logic of biological survival, the formless cannot eat you. The infinite cannot physically harm you. Therefore, to the primitive brain, the divine is completely irrelevant. You carry the weight of this oppression in your very posture, even if you have never noticed it. It is the subtle, chronic tightness in your jaw. It is the low-grade, vibrating anxiety humming deep in your chest as you navigate your day. You are constantly, involuntarily braced for impact. Your perception is not a free-roaming bird. It is a hostage chained to the dense and the dangerous. Light and shadow, sharp corners and solid walls. These are not merely innocent elements of your environment. They are the literal iron bars of your cage. They are forced upon your awareness by a biological mandate that rigidly dictates what reality is allowed to be. You are trapped in a perpetual, hyper-vigilant state of emergency. Your eyes are desperately scanning a material wasteland for physical threats, completely oblivious to the fact that this very act of constant, terrified scanning is exactly what keeps you locked out of the true universe. The profound tragedy is that your soul is desperate to expand into the boundless, but your flesh forces it to violently contract, to shrink down, and focus solely on what is dense, heavy, and mortal. This is the silent, aching tragedy of your daily life. You are a limitless consciousness, forcibly squeezed into a biological survival suit that demands you only pay attention to the dirt beneath your feet. You are entirely at the mercy of a meat-driven agenda. But knowing this, a natural rebellion stirs within you. You might believe that if you just concentrate harder, if you just force your eyes to look deeper, or push your logical, analytical mind to its absolute maximum limit, you can somehow overpower this biological censorship. You might think you can fight this dictator and win. But what happens when you try to use brute physical force and tense, desperate focus to shatter a barrier made of pure instinct? You have felt the sheer, crushing exhaustion of trying to figure it all out, haven't you? Think about the times you have sat down, determined to finally break through the veil, to finally understand the grand mystery of your own existence. You furrow your brow. You squeeze your eyes shut, or you stare so intensely at a fixed point that your vision begins to blur. You tense your jaw and push your highly logical, analytical mind to its absolute maximum capacity. You try to forcefully decode the silence of the universe, treating spiritual awakening like a complex puzzle that you can simply brute force your way into solving. But I want you to feel the heavy, undeniable fatigue that always follows this effort. Notice the dull ache creeping into your temples and the physical heaviness pulling down on your shoulders. You are losing a battle that was rigged against you from the very moment you were born. There is a profound, silent biological conspiracy working against your spiritual ambition. You cannot use the dense, heavy tools of the physical body to pry open the gates of the immaterial. It is a heartbreaking exercise in pure futility. Every time you attempt to use intense concentration, strained staring, or sharp logical deduction to grasp the infinite, your biology violently protests. The muscles in your neck begin to tighten and cramp. Your eyes begin to sting, begging for the momentary relief of a blink. Your stomach demands sustenance, and your brain quickly fogs over with an overwhelming, undeniable need for sleep. The flesh is incredibly jealous of the spirit, and it will always, without exception, conspire in favor of matter. It will always use its ultimate, unbeatable weapon against your desire to transcend sheer exhaustion. The undeniable gravity of your own biology is meticulously designed to relentlessly pull you back down into the mud of the physical world. You are trying to capture the boundless wind using a heavy, rusted iron net. The harder you grip the metal, the faster your arms give out. This is the tragic flaw in how we are taught to seek truth. We believe that if we just think harder, if we analyze more, if we force our physical senses to remain hyper-alert, we will eventually conquer the illusion. But your biological organism was never built to endure the staggering weight of the infinite. It is fragile, mortal, and demands constant, pathetic maintenance. Just as your conscious awareness feels like it is finally reaching the outer edges of the physical plane, the body violently sounds the alarm, aggressively snapping your attention back to a sudden joint pain, a random itch, or a crushing wave of lethargy. You carry a deep, quiet frustration because you mistakenly believe this physical exhaustion is a personal spiritual failure. You secretly fear you are simply not trying hard enough. But the truth is, you are trying to use a heavy hammer to decipher a subtle melody. True reality cannot be bullied into submission by a tired, straining organism. The intellect and the physical senses will always inevitably bow to the absolute dictation of biological fatigue. The pure force of your willpower, when aggressively channeled through the dense gravity of muscle and bone, will always crumble under the colossal weight of trying to process the divine. The physical vessel is utterly and completely incapable of doing the heavy lifting you are demanding of it. But to truly understand why this fleshy body is so desperately outmatched by the sheer scale of the consciousness you are trying to experience, we must closely examine the profound structural mismatch between what you truly are and the extremely limited vessel you have been forced to operate. Look down at your hands for a moment. Feel the physical boundaries of your skin, the density of your bones, the subtle pulsing of blood beneath the surface. I want you to completely shift how you perceive this form you walk around in every day. You have been taught to identify with this body, to believe that this flesh and blood is the absolute totality of who you are. But to truly grasp why you cannot see the spiritual world, you must embrace a profound, almost anesthetic detachment from your physical self. You are not this body. You are an immense, infinite, multi-dimensional consciousness, temporarily forced to operate within a severely outdated piece of organic hardware. Imagine the most advanced, limitless software ever conceived, a majestic operating system capable of simulating entire galaxies, processing boundless frequencies of pure energy, and calculating the infinite depths of eternity. That staggering, immeasurable intelligence is your true essence. That is your soul. Now imagine taking that infinite, flawless software and trying to run it on a rusted, obsolete machine from decades ago. A fragile device with frayed wiring, primitive memory banks, and a tiny, cracked screen. That is exactly what is happening to you right now. Your physical body, and specifically your brain and optic nerves, are nothing more than incredibly low-bandwidth cables. They physically cannot transmit the staggering data of the spiritual universe. Feel the existential claustrophobia of this mismatch. You are a giant, a boundless being of pure awareness, painfully squeezed into a tiny, fragile biological box. You walk through life, feeling a constant, subtle friction, a deep sense that you are too vast for the life you are living. That friction is the immense data of the invisible spectrum constantly crashing against the primitive antennas of your nervous system. Your optic nerves act as a severe bottleneck, compressing the breathtaking majesty of existence into a few pathetic electrical signals that barely keep the screen of your mind flickering. If you are truly listening right now, if you feel this deep, undeniable truth echoing in your chest, I want to know that we are connected in this understanding. Pause for a second and write the words, "I am greater than this vessel," down below in the comments. It is a quiet, powerful declaration to yourself, a way to anchor this realization in the physical world and signal to your own mind that you are waking up. And if you seek to constantly remind yourself of this truth, to stay aligned with this expanding frequency, away from the noise and density of the ordinary world, consider walking this path with us and subscribing to the channel. We are here to slowly, methodically dismantle the illusion together. When you expect this outdated biological hardware to show you the spiritual realm, you are setting yourself up for profound disappointment. You try to look at reality through these frail optical cables and wonder why everything feels so dense, so heavy, and so disconnected. It is not because the spiritual world is absent or hiding from you, it is simply because your organic machinery lacks the processing power to render it. The human brain literally crashes when trying to load the divine. You're attempting to download the entire cosmos through a fragile wire that was only designed to help a primitive animal find food and avoid danger. Recognizing this brings a wave of incredible, sweeping relief. You do not have to be frustrated with your eyes anymore. They are doing the best they can with severely limited, obsolete technology. You can finally step back and observe your physical vessel with a sense of peaceful detachment, knowing you are simply the vast intelligence observing the glitches of a broken machine. But this severe technological limitation leaves a permanent, invisible scar on the way you process existence. Because if your physical hardware is entirely restricted to processing only dense, heavy and solid shapes, what does that do to the very architecture of your mind? How can a consciousness locked inside this primitive machinery even begin to conceptualize the infinite, when every single thought is chained to the only world it has ever been allowed to see? We pride ourselves on our boundless creativity. You can close your eyes right now and conjure up sprawling, ethereal landscapes, floating cities, or celestial beings made of pure starlight. You feel a certain warmth, a comforting pride in how vast and unrestricted your inner world appears to be. But if you sit very still and look closely at the architecture of your grandest visions, a quiet, deeply melancholic truth begins to wash over you. Every single thing you have ever imagined, no matter how wild or profoundly mystical it seems, is entirely constructed from the stolen, recycled scraps of the physical world. You are simply rearranging the same tired, dense inventory of earthly concepts. You borrow the texture of stone, the color of the deep ocean, the familiar shape of a human face, and you blend them together, eagerly convincing yourself you have touched the divine. But try in this very second to imagine a completely new primary color. Not a shade, not a mixture, but a base color that simply does not exist in nature. You cannot. You physically cannot do it. Your mind instantly hits a solid, impenetrable wall. This is the moment you realize your imagination is not flying free. It is fiercely chained to the physical textures and terrestrial geometries you were spoon-fed since birth. This is the profound, quiet tragedy of our intellectual arrogance. We are desperately trying to grasp the infinite, formless architecture of the spirit using a mental vocabulary made entirely of dirt, gravity, and boundaries. Trying to conceptualize the breathtaking, multidimensional expanse of your own soul with a mind trained solely by the material plane is like walking up to a massive, ancient wooden door that holds back a roaring, infinite ocean. You lean in, press your eye against a tiny, rusted brass keyhole, and through that microscopic opening, you see a tiny, flickering dot of blue water. And from that pathetic, severely restricted glimpse, you arrogantly believe you fully comprehend the crushing depths, the monstrous currents, and the terrifying majesty of the entire sea. We build entire philosophies, spiritual dogmas, and belief systems around that tiny blue dot, completely oblivious to the fact that the true staggering ocean cannot possibly be squeezed through the rigid keyhole of human conceptualization. Sit with the heavy, restrictive weight of that intellectual prison for a moment. Feel the subtle, quiet mourning in the center of your chest as your soul watches your mind attempt to paint the divine with such crude, earthly brushes. You yearn to experience higher dimensions, yet your mind immediately, aggressively demands to know what shape they take, what color they radiate, how they would feel against your skin. The earthly intellect insists on giving everything a physical form, a sharp edge, a tangible boundary, because solid matter is the only language it has ever learned to speak. It is a heartbreaking, suffocating limitation. Your spirit is desperate to dissolve into the unimaginable, formless void, but the mind constantly, fearfully drags it back into the familiar mud. It insists that true reality must look like something you can hold, measure, or touch. This creates a deep, lingering sorrow within you, a profound sense of being hopelessly gagged and bound by a visual vocabulary that is utterly, tragically inadequate for the cosmic journey you are trying to take. We tend to assume that this severe poverty of imagination is just a harmless quirk of being human. We accept our intense reliance on physical shapes and textures as a natural comfort, a safe harbor for our thoughts. But this heavy, inescapable reliance on the dense world does not merely limit what you are able to dream about in the quiet sanctuary of your own mind. The shapes, the forms, and the endless barrage of worldly scenery are not just sitting there passively waiting for your interpretation. The material world does not just wait quietly to be observed. It has a forceful, undeniable momentum of its own, leading us to a highly uncomfortable realization about what is actually guiding your gaze when you open your eyes. Notice the light in the room you are sitting in right now. Do not just look at it, but try to feel its quiet, relentless pressure. We walk through our lives carrying a very specific, deeply ingrained illusion about how we interact with the space around us. You believe that when you turn your head to look at a wall, a tree, or a passing shadow, you are the active explorer. You feel as though your gaze is a beam of intention, a sweeping searchlight that you command with absolute authority. But I want you to surrender that comforting illusion for a moment and sink into the chilling, hypnotic truth of pure physics. You are not actively looking at anything. You are simply being bombarded. Every single visual experience you have ever had is the result of a passive, compulsory reaction. Trillions upon trillions of microscopic photons traveling at incomprehensible speeds are violently pouring out of light bulbs and distant stars, hurtling through space and ricocheting off the solid objects around you. When they smash into the surface of a wooden table or a concrete wall, they bounce off at precise, unyielding angles, entirely dictated by the cold, mathematical laws of physical geometry. You do not choose to see the table. You simply happen to be standing in the crossfire of this relentless, bouncing debris. The light forcefully crashes into the delicate receptors of your retina, and your biology is mechanically forced to react. Let the weight of that absolute lack of control wash over you. Your visual attention is not free. It is a mechanical puppet, and its strings are constantly being pulled by the chaotic ricocheting of particles. Your eyes are involuntarily dragged toward whatever reflects the most light, whatever casts the deepest shadow, whatever creates the sharpest contrast. You are caught in a ceaseless, undulating current of cause and effect, passively absorbing the relentless waves of a physical ocean that dictates exactly where your attention must go. This is the profound determinism of light and shadow. It is an organic indoctrination that happens every single second your eyes are open, training you to simply react, respond, and submit to the overwhelming physics of the material environment. You feel a quiet, underlying disorientation when you truly realize this. The comforting sense of agency, the belief that you are the master of your own observation, begins to dissolve into the sheer, unavoidable mechanics of nature. You are constantly, involuntarily reacting to the physical world, dragged by the invisible currents of bouncing light. You're a captive audience in a theater, where the movie is forcefully projected directly onto the back of your eyes, with absolutely no way to look away from the screen as long as the projector is running. You are utterly at the mercy of whatever the light decides to bounce off of next. This continuous forced reaction to the bouncing particles of the physical world keeps you entirely tethered to a mechanical, determined existence. You are endlessly reacting to the dense, heavy shapes of matter, convinced that this passive bombardment is the only way to experience reality. But if the physical mechanics of sight leave you so completely powerless, nothing more than a biological receiver trapped in a storm of ricocheting light, what exactly happens when you are finally asked to abandon this entire mechanical process? There is an undeniable practical utility to the eyes you possess. They are perfectly adequate for navigating the intricate, often exhausting social theater of daily human life. They allow you to recognize a face in a crowded room, to step around a physical obstacle, and to maneuver your physical vessel through the dense architecture of your city. But a grave, catastrophic error occurs when the human mind takes this simple, primitive survival tool and elevates it to the throne of absolute truth. We have cultivated a staggering, blinding arrogance. The human ego, puffed up by its own logic, stands upon a tiny speck of dust in an infinite cosmos and boldly decrees that if a thing does not reflect light into its biological retinas, that thing simply does not exist. This is the ultimate pathetic hubris of the material ego. You walk through your life demanding that the boundless, unfathomable universe shrink itself down and present itself as a solid object just to satisfy your skepticism. You cross your arms, tense your jaw, and demand hard physical proof of the spiritual realm. You insist that the divine must cast a shadow, that it must possess a texture, that it must obey the fragile earthly laws of geometry before you will grant it permission to be real. This supreme arrogance is the heaviest chain you carry. It is the very reason the spiritual dimension remains utterly silent to you. The infinite does not answer to the demands of a temporary, arrogant biological form. It will never diminish its majesty to fit inside the narrow, demanding parameters of a human skull. To step into the profound, sweeping current of true spiritual sight, there must be a violent, absolute destruction of your faith in physical forms. You must voluntarily strip away the heavy armor of your earthly intellect. You cannot negotiate with the infinite using the vocabulary of a primitive mammal. The true capacity to see with the spirit requires a mystical rupture, a complete shattering of your anthropocentric pride. You must stop worshipping at the altar of light and shape and learn to bow your head in profound reverence to the absolute void. The void is not an empty, lifeless space. The dark, formless emptiness you fear so deeply is actually the raw, unshaped canvas of true reality. Feel the terrifying, magnificent weight of this surrender. You must let go of your desperate, white-knuckled grip on the edges and boundaries of the material world. You must allow yourself to plummet into the silence that has no form, no color, and no earthly dimension. It is a terrifying plunge for the ego, because the ego only knows how to survive where there is contrast, friction, and solid ground to stand on. But for your soul, this dive into the dark, silent abyss is the ultimate homecoming. It is the only place where the majestic truth of your existence can finally breathe, unburdened by the claustrophobic dictatorship of matter. The true observer does not demand light to see. The true observer becomes the profound, silent darkness where all things are born. Yet as you stand on the precipice of this formless void, preparing to abandon your absolute trust in the shapes and shadows around you, a chilling, monumental question begins to echo in the dark. If these physical eyes were never designed to show you the truth of the universe, and if this elaborate visual projection is nothing but a grand, restrictive illusion, what exactly is the true, hidden purpose of the heavy images they project? Why does this vivid, incredibly convincing visual theater exist at all? You walk through this life with a very specific, unquestioned assumption about what your vision is actually doing for you. When you look across a room, when you gaze up at the night sky, or when you simply watch a leaf fall to the ground, you believe that your sight is connecting you to the universe. You believe that your eyes are the bridge between your inner world and the vast expanse of the outside. But this is the grandest, most deeply entrenched deception of your human experience. Prepare yourself to completely invert everything you thought you knew about perception. Your vision is not an instrument of integration. It is a relentless, mechanical engine of profound and heartbreaking segregation. Think about the immense, heavy loneliness that sometimes washes over you for absolutely no logical reason. You can be standing in a crowded street or looking out over a magnificent ocean, and yet you feel entirely alone, trapped behind your own face. You feel the subtle chronic tension in the bridge of your nose and the tightness in your brow, a somatic symptom of being a prisoner locked inside a fleshy cockpit. This aching isolation is not a psychological flaw. It is a direct product of the visual field. The moment your brain registers a hard line, a boundary, or the edge of a physical object, it instantly creates a conceptual distance. By showing you exactly where your skin ends and the chair begins, your visual cortex violently slices the universe into two distinct categories, me and not me. Vision forces you to believe that you are a tiny, fragmented island of consciousness, marooned in a massive, cold, and entirely separate reality. This is the ultimate optical delusion of the human condition. The grand plot twist of your existence is that the separation you see is not actually there. It is a neurological rendering error. You have been heavily conditioned to believe that you are an isolated passenger, a solitary eye sitting quietly in the control room of your skull, peering out through the twin windows of your eyes at an external world that is completely alienated from you. But the boundaries you perceive are simply the exact coordinates where your biological ability to process energy runs out. The space between your hand and the table is not empty distance. It is a dense, pulsating ocean of interconnected energy that your outdated physical hardware simply paints as invisible. You are not looking at the universe from a distance. You are the universe, temporarily perceiving itself through a severely restricted, fragmented filter that generates the illusion of distance. When this monumental realization truly takes root in your chest, a vertiginous, breathtaking expansion begins to happen. The heavy, claustrophobic walls of your individuality start to tremble and dissolve. The suffocating bubble of the separated ego pops, leaving you breathless in the sudden, staggering absence of limits. You are no longer a tiny, fragile creature trying to survive in a hostile, disconnected environment. You are the seamless, borderless totality of all things. The physical shapes that once intimidated you lose their grip, revealed as nothing more than temporary ripples on the surface of your own infinite ocean. The heartbreaking tragedy of your life has been using your eyes to try and find the divine, without realizing that the very act of looking physically pushes the divine away, chopping the infinite into isolated, manageable pieces. But this radical shift in understanding leaves your rational mind frantically grasping for its old familiar anchors. It creates a terrifying friction within the intellect. If the universe is truly a seamless, undivided whole, and the borders of your physical body are nothing but a biological illusion generated by flawed optics, then what exactly happens to the specific identity you have always called me? If the boundary between inside and outside is a lie constructed by the visual cortex, then where exactly is this isolated witness hiding within you? Let us slow everything down right now. I want to ask something deeply intimate of you, something that requires your absolute, undivided attention. If you are in a safe space to do so, softly close your eyes for just a moment. I want you to turn your attention completely inward. Forget the room you are in, forget the sounds around you. Direct your focus entirely into the dark space of your own head. Now, wait for a thought to pass by. It could be any thought, a random memory, a passing worry, or just a mental image of an object. Just watch it appear and disappear in the dark. Now I want you to answer a question that will shatter the very foundation of your physical existence. Who exactly is watching that thought? Try to find them. Seriously, take your imaginary finger and try to point to the exact precise millimeter inside your brain where that observer is currently sitting. Search for the I. You can feel the physical weight of your skull. You can imagine the billions of biological neurons firing, the intricate webs of tissue and blood vessels, and the dense matter of your anatomy. But as you scan through the heavy biology of your own head, looking for the tiny spectator sitting in the audience of your mind, a haunting realization begins to wash over you. You cannot find the witness. You can locate your temples. You can locate the back of your eyelids. You can feel the steady pulse in your neck, but the actual conscious presence that is looking at the darkness has absolutely no physical coordinates. The entity that you call me, the deep, silent watcher that has been present for every single moment of your entire life, does not occupy a single millimeter of physical space. It cannot be touched. It cannot be put under a microscope. If a surgeon were to open your skull and examine every microscopic fiber of your brain, they would find water, fat, and electrical impulses, but they would never, ever find the witness. The observer inside you is not made of matter. It does not reflect light. It has no height, no depth, no width, and no weight. It is an entirely undetectable void. Let the sheer magnitude of this intimate discovery settle deeply into your chest. You have spent decades believing that you are a physical object located in a physical space. Yet when you actively search for the very core of your identity, when you hunt for the witness behind your eyes, you discover that your true self is made of absolutely nothing. The one who watches the world is a profound, unlocatable silence that simply witnesses the noise of the body. You are not inside your brain looking out. You are a formless, invisible awareness that simply registers the brain's activity. The true reality of who you are is entirely absent of physical form. This forces your mind into a deeply uncomfortable, haunting trance. You are a ghost inhabiting a biological machine, completely unable to point to where you actually exist. The harder you look for yourself in the physical anatomy, the more you realize that the you who is looking is essentially empty space. But if the absolute truth is that your consciousness has no location, no weight and no form, how can we possibly reconcile this ghostly emptiness with the undeniable, heavy, agonizing limitations of the flesh we are forced to wear? Feel the intense, almost tearing sensation resting right in the center of your chest right now. It is the profound, agonizing paradox of your very existence. You are currently breathing, feeling the heavy, undeniable pull of gravity on your bones, sensing the ambient temperature of the air brushing against your skin. You are undeniably this three-dimensional body, walking through a world of dense, unforgiving matter, mechanically processing the bouncing light of a temporary universe. Yet, at the exact same agonizing moment, you are the formless, unlocatable, boundless awareness that we just discovered. You are the invisible, infinite intelligence that swallows dimensions whole. You are the heavy, rusting cage, and you are simultaneously the boundless, eternal sky outside of it. This dual existence is the tightrope you walk every single second, and it is tearing you apart. The deepest root of all your human suffering, that chronic, vibrating anxiety you carry deep in the pit of your stomach, the existential exhaustion that never quite goes away, even after a long night of sleep, stems from a very specific, catastrophic choice you make every single morning. You constantly choose to shrink. You take the staggering, immortal vastness of your true spiritual essence, and you forcefully, violently cram it entirely into the frail, trembling vessel of your physical identity. You look into the mirror, and you falsely declare that the aging skin, the tired eyes, and the heavy flesh are the absolute totality of who you are. You fixate your entire identity on the brutal limitations of solid matter, and in doing so, you actively annihilate your capacity to exist in the spirit. When you anchor your existence strictly to the heavy biological security of your body, you become a prisoner who has tragically fallen in love with the cold iron of their own cell. You worship the dense world because it is deeply familiar. It casts a shadow. It pushes back when you press against it. It gives your terrified, rational mind something tangible to measure and protect. But this desperate, white-knuckled clinging to the physical world is starving your soul. It is a slow, suffocating death of your true frequency. You are trying to protect a fragile biological illusion while locking out the very infinite power that created you. True reality will never, ever reveal itself to a mind that is utterly terrified of losing its physical shape. The majestic, absolute truth of the cosmos only opens its doors to those who are fiercely willing to completely dilute themselves. You must allow the rigid, heavy borders of your earthly identity to melt. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet begin to lose its absolute, dictatorial authority. Let the arrogant certainty of your physical senses crumble into ash. You are not a frail human animal desperately trying to claw your way up into a spiritual state. You are a vast, formless, untouchable spirit currently surviving a severely restricted, highly compressed human hallucination. It is time to let the flesh become transparent. You must completely release the exhausting grip you have on the false safety of your physical name, your earthly history, and the heavy reflection in the mirror. To truly exist in the spirit, you must stop being so stubbornly, tragically solid. You must become like the empty space that quietly holds the burning stars, vast, eternally silent, and entirely untouched by the chaotic density of matter. But how do you actually force yourself to cross this final, terrifying threshold? When your entire biological system is screaming at you to hold on tight, how do you command a brain that is heavily addicted to survival, light, and geometry to simply let go of the physical world and surrender to the formless dark? Think of a simple woven finger trap. The more frantically you pull your hands apart, the tighter the fibers grip you, completely locking you in place. This is exactly what happens when you desperately strain your physical eyes to capture the spiritual world. You tense your intellect and hunt for visible proof, and in doing so, you only pull the heavy, dense fibers of the material plane tighter around your consciousness. But the moment you stop pulling, the moment you gently relax your grip and accept the space you are in, the trap instantly loosens. You do not need luminosity to experience the divine. True reality is not something you actively hunt down with your fragile biology. It is the breathtaking vastness that seamlessly embraces you the very second you finally surrender the exhausting need to look. Let go of the demand to see everything in shapes and shadows. Allow yourself the profound, peaceful relief of stepping back into the formless void. The silent darkness behind your closed eyelids is not an empty absence. It is the infinite, quiet canvas of your true home. If you feel this deep, peaceful release, and if you have journeyed with us to the very end of this timeline, anchor your new frequency below in the comments with the words, "I surrender to the unseen." It is a quiet, powerful declaration of your absolute freedom. If this message resonated with your spirit and you wish to dive even further into these cosmic depths, simply click on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. And for those who feel called to support this work and unlock exclusive, deeper explorations, consider becoming a channel member to walk this path closely with us. For now, there is nothing left to figure out. Simply close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let the infinite hold you.